Hey everyone, welcome to Papa's Workshop. Today is the day that I'm going to add the fence to this new wasteboard. Now there's a lot of different options that you can choose, and there's many different videos out there that show a variety of different ways to do it. Because I use my CNC machine in a very versatile way with many different types of projects, I need to have a fence equally diverse as the projects that I do. I'm also going to use a sliding type fence that I can adjust any way that I need to be able to adjust it to hold the projects, and I'm going to use the bench dogs down at the bottom to be able to secure the project that I can easily remove so I can do tiling projects. Now when you use the bench dogs, there's a wide variety there also. Some people will use metal pins. I don't want to do that. Metal pins have a tendency to get in the way of bits no matter how hard you try to keep them. At some point in time, that bit from that router is going to hit that metal pin, and that's not going to be a good day. Another thing that I have seen often used, and I have actually considered it, was to use the PVC pipe. That way, if the bit hits the PVC, it's not going to cause a problem. The bit will just cut easily through this and continue on. And another type is using a wood dowel. And I think that's what I'm going to do. Now this is a 1/2-inch oak dowel that I think will work out just fine. And this will be able to provide the versatility that I need to be able to have on the CNC machine. Before we can actually drill the holes into this wasteboard, we need to be able to test it out. So I'm going to create a brand new file that's a single-sided. I'm going to just make this 5 by 5 and 3/4 of an inch. That's going to be just fine. I am using the inches. I'm also going to be using the surface as my 0 position, and definitely I'm using the bottom left-hand corner. With all that set, I'll just hit OK. From there, I'm going to grab a circle. I'm going to bring this circle in, and I'm going to set this up at the coordinates of 0 and 0, because right now that would be way away from where I'm working. So with that set, I have the diameter and a 0.52 of an inch. So that's going to be the first circle. We'll close this out. I'll slide this over where it needs to be. I'm going to grab it. I'll use the little handles and I'll just slide it over into position. You also notice that the snap tool is turned on. That really doesn't matter at this point. I just need to get this hole placed. Then I'll hit Control C and Control V to copy and make a duplicate of this hole. So I'm going to put all 3 holes in place, and then we're going to size them. Now remember, the first one was 0.52 of an inch, and the actual die rod that I measured with the calipers was at 0.51. So at this point, I'm going to highlight this middle circle, and we'll go back over here to the circle icon. We'll click on it, and I'm going to change the size of this to 0.515. I'll hit apply. We'll close this out, and I'll do the same thing with this for circle, and I'm going to put this at 0.51. Now that takes care of all 3 of my circles with the 3 different sizes. Now obviously, if you're working with a dowel rod or whatever measurements, you will be changing and putting in your own measurements. But now it's time to select this icon, and let's move over and set up the toolpath for this. And I'm going to be using the pocket toolpath for this. I'm going to measure or cut down 0.375 of an inch with a 1/4 inch down cut bit. And of course, I have to select a vector. So I'll highlight these 3 circles and then I'll calculate. And that will give me the toolpath that I need. So let me reset this now and hit Review Toolpaths, and you can see exactly what it's going to look like. And that is going to give me the 3 size holes that we can actually test. So let's save this toolpath, let's get it out to the machine, and let's run this very simple project, but a very critical and important project, because without this test, you really don't know what size holes to be able to actually carve on the final project. Now when I used the calipers, it looked like it was going to be about 0.51 of an inch, and that was going to be very tight. And if I put that in, yeah, that is tight, but it will go in. And that's too tight. When I try the next hole, that goes in a little bit easier. But this one, with that little bit of tolerance, goes in nicely. It's tight enough to be able to have it where it's not going to slop around, and it'll fit in there. So that's going to be the size hole. So let's get back into the VCarve Pro now, and I'm going to set up the toolpaths to be able to cut the holes at 0.52 of an inch. Now where do I want the holes? I want to put one hole here, maybe two at the most, but definitely one here and then one over here, because that will give the registration point for this corner. And then I'm going to put holes in the center of each of these going across. That way when I do a tiling project, I can easily slip these out. When I printed the grid lines, I used the bottom left-hand corner as my XY0 position. I want to do the same thing when I put the holes into this board. The first step is I decided to draw out the entire wasteboard exactly as it appears on the actual machine. I also put everything on its own layer. This way I could clearly identify the different components and turn off and on those components as needed as I was working on the design. I also used these guidelines right down here to clearly identify exactly the specific points on the actual machine. Once I was finished with the different guidelines, I would delete them one at a time as they were no longer needed. And that way, if I needed to add more, I could do it without confusing the entire drawing. Now I don't want to cut it out this way, because if I cut these holes and I'm just a little bit off on my points, it's not going to work. So I'm taking this entire drawing and I'm putting the grid work exactly down to the bottom left-hand corner, exactly as I had cut the grid work originally. But look and notice that the holes are outside of the workpiece. Will this still carve? I'm here to tell you, yes it will. Now when I moved it down, I just used it manually. I can't use the move function because it's going to reference the outside corner of these circles and it still will be off. But this is okay. I can use the control function and the arrow keys and move this right into place where it needs to be. At this point, I'm going to hold down the control key and then use the up arrow and it will slide right to the point that it needs to be. And then I'll do the same thing. Holding down the control key, I'll hit the left arrow and move that until it's right on the XY0 position. And that's the exact point that I had used when I cut the actual grid. That's the precise point. Now the grid lines served its purpose. It gave me that point right down here at the bottom for the XY0 position, so I can turn that layer off. The only layer that's left now is my green layer for the holes itself. And the only thing that's left to do is to create the toolpath and cut this out. Just for your information, I am going to save this file because this is an exact duplicate of what's on the CNC machine with all the different measurements. No, I'm not planning on using this to do any type of carving, but really don't need to. I want this just to be in the file for a reference later down the road. And the other thing I want to point out, if you're not using these guidelines to help with your layout of your different projects, you're really missing out. This is a tremendous tool to be able to use because you can put in the exact measurements that you need to get very precise drawings. And the other thing is, don't forget about using the layers, because the layers be able to show you the entire graphic representation. But then as you design the different features, you can turn these different layers on and off depending on what you're working on. Fantastic feature. So I hope you'll take advantage of this feature in the VCarve also. Now I want to get back to the actual toolpath, and this is what it's going to look like. When you set up the toolpath with the XY0 down at that bottom corner, the actual holes are showing outside of the work area, but that's okay. This is going to carve just fine, because the most important thing was have that exact reference point in the computer as what we're going to have on this CNC machine, because that is going to determine the accuracy of the holes, and without that accuracy, this whole project is worthless. I need those holes in the exact location. Therefore, I need to have the exact reference point that I had when I cut the grid as I'm cutting these holes. Once I'm satisfied with this, then I'll save the toolpath and I'll take this out to the shop and we're ready to actually cut the holes. I loaded the file into my OpenBuild software and it's now starting to cut that first hole. And you can see it's cutting just fine, exactly what I want. Remember, the corner of that grid is the XY0 home position, and I'm going to use this point for all of the future projects that I do. If you recall from the previous video, the corner of that grid work is the actual work home position, and it's exactly 2 inches on the x-axis and the y-axis from the machine home position. The good thing about it is the OpenBuild software remembers that, and I can go to that exact precise point and repeat that over and over. And that's one of the goals that I had, as I wanted to be able to establish that as a precise fixed location. So you can see it's programmed now, going through the actual operation, cutting all these holes. And I want you to take a look and see just how accurate these holes are being placed exactly on that line with the grid work itself. And that is the key to the success of this entire grid that we're doing, because I want to be able to use this as my reference point for the projects to be able to drop into that slot. I want to give you a real good close-up picture on just how precise this is. These holes actually come right up to the edge of that grid line, giving a perfect reference point. Now the first real test is to see if the dowel rods will actually fit into the holes. And yes, that is perfect. They're slipping in exactly as I had planned, and that's the reason you do the test carve, to get the precise diameter of the hole to begin with. That way you don't have a problem when you're test fitting for the first time these different dowel rods. So now for the next test, let's take a project board, drop it in place using these dowel rods as a reference, and seeing if it actually lines up with the XY0 position right on that corner. As you can see, when it slides in and hits those dowel rods, it gives you that exact precise location. And this is repeatable. With this type of a setup, it's repeatable for project after project. Now, of course, if I'm doing a tiling project, I can easily remove these dowel rods and place my oversized project on there. But to finish clamping this down, I can use my slide bar, bring it right down to its location, and tighten it. And that way, it's not going to move. The only thing you might want to do is put something on this side, depending on the type of project. Now when you put a project board down and slide it in position, that gives you a perfect alignment. It's indexed right down to that work XY0 position. With this type of design now, I have the pins to be able to hold and reference my project. I can still use the actual clamps to hold down the projects if I need to, and I have the slide bars that's available to be able to hold the projects. Now if I were going to set this up, I'd be able to set it right down in here, slide it over. You would have the perfect alignment. I'd bring that down, tighten this. That would hold it that direction. If I felt the need that it was going to be a problem here, I can clamp it there. I can also clamp it over here. And I'm ready to be able to carve. The versatility of this is amazing. The ability to use the traditional clamps, to be able to use the dowel rods, and the horizontal clamp is just absolutely amazing. And I love the versatility of this new wasteboard and the fence system. Well, there you have it. This project is now finished. I have the fence on there that I've been dreaming about for a long time. And if we go back to the original goals that we had, this new wasteboard and fence system meets all of the different goals that I had. So I'm very happy to be able to have this type of a setup in the shop, and I look forward to being able to start making a lot of new projects. These pins that just slip in and out, and this slide bar on there makes it so easy to be able to transfer from one project to another. And if you're doing multiple projects, you can change it out so easy. That's one of the things that I really like. And the ability to switch over and do the tiling, again, is just so easy to be able to accomplish. So I hope you enjoyed this video today. If you did, by all means, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that bell notification. Because I look forward to seeing you in the next video real soon, where we're going to put this new wasteboard to work and do some projects. Can't wait for that. It's coming up real soon. So for now, bye-bye. Look forward to seeing you real soon in the shop.